On behalf of the Finnish Youth Research Society, I formally welcome everybody here in the House of the Science and there is online. Warmly welcome to this beautiful guest lecture by Trebbe Johnson, and warmly welcome Trebbe Johnson to this House of Sciences and everybody. So welcome Panu Pihkala, co-organizer of this event and from University of Helsinki.
And for those of you who don't know, she is Sophia Laine Research Society.
And for everybody here, to let you know that we have like this online streaming, and we will also record this event from the part of Trebbe Johnson's lecture, and also from the part of the requested commenters. Hanna Rintala and Panu and me will keep those. But from the other parts, if you are asking questions, hopefully you are asking questions, so those will not be included in that recording. That will be in Tunne ry Environmental Emotions Organization's website later on. Yeah. I think that was the technical part, except the fruits. I want to say about the fruits. If you didn't have time to take them, or if you want to take more, when this session is over, there is plastic bags, so you can take rest of you. So remember to take some souvenirs after the seminar, please. Your turn.
Thank you, Sophia, and warmly welcome also on my behalf. So I'm Panu Pihkala from University of Helsinki and different projects. I've had the honor of hosting Trebbe Johnson now in this Finnish road trip. We were in Keuru Eco Village on Sunday and in Tampere on Monday and Turku yesterday, and now here in Helsinki. So Trebbe has been working with several methods, and she's well known for establishing the Radical Joy for Hard Times network. We will hear more about that today. She has been also working with intensive wilderness periods and retreats, for example, and people of many ages, including young university students, but also military veterans and a lot of things in between. You have received information about several of her books in the invitation to this event. Radical Joy for Hard Times is the name of one volume, and her recent book, Fierce Consciousness, Surviving the Sorrows of Earth and Self, also gives us the title for this guest lecture. And so it is my honor to welcome Trebbe Johnson. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Sophia. Thanks to all of you for coming. Thanks for speaking English. It's been, I've only been here a week, and it's just been so wonderful to travel, to take walks in beautiful places, and especially to meet so many people who are thinking about the environment and how people can live with what's happening and get along with it. It's really, I've just been so inspired. As Panu said, the title comes from one of the chapters in the new book, Fierce Consciousness. And it is a true story. The brother of a good friend of mine was an expert skier, and he liked to go to places that are very remote, not typical ski trails at resorts. And he was skiing in a very remote place in Colorado once, and he heard the sound behind him that was clearly an avalanche. And he tried to outrun it, but it caught up with him, and he felt himself being swept down this mountainside by a pile of snow. And he said to himself, well, I guess I'm going to die. And then he thought, well, maybe that's not so bad after all. He just kind of accepted it. The snow stopped all of a sudden. He said to himself, I'm not dead. Now what? And so he freed his arm just enough, and he punched. He punched through the avalanche. And he punched, and the snow was such, and he was in the right kind of position. What he punched through was sunlight and air and life. And I heard that story many years ago, and it struck me as quite a wonderful metaphor for how we deal with difficult things. When something catches us up, we try to outrun it, or we try and maybe go around to a different path. Maybe sometimes we try and fight it, but he wasn't able to even begin to do that. And then there comes this point where whatever it is, and obviously what we're all thinking about now, I think, is climate change, whatever it is catches up with us, and we realize, okay, it's here, I can't fight it anymore. This is the reality. That's the moment of acceptance. Then what? Then we punch through the avalanche, and that is, what do we do right now? What is the best action that we can do right now in this moment? There's no guarantee. There was no thought of, well, if I punch through the avalanche, perhaps I will live. It was just, I mean, there's obviously that behind the gesture, but it's just the gesture without having any guarantee that it's going to work or have success. So in the Radical Joy for Hard Times book, I have a chapter called Acceptance is Not Submission. In other words, sometimes you say to people that we have to accept the reality of what's going on around us. And it's climate change, but it's also maybe a member of your family is addicted to drugs, or maybe you're having a problem with your partner. Maybe you have a coworker at your job who is treating you badly. Maybe there's debt, financial worry. Whatever it is, we can't deal with it until we accept it. And sometimes people think, well, acceptance means that it's okay with us if this happens. That's not right. They want to instantly fight this idea. But the fact is that without the acceptance, we're not facing it. And until we face it, we can't deal with it. So, and then there's that radical gesture of punching through the avalanche, which is what this man did. And he's still alive today. So, a story that I heard when I was writing the book was about a man named James Stockwell. And he ran for vice president years ago in the United States. They lost, but he told a pretty interesting story. He was a war veteran who fought in Vietnam, and for many years, not just a short time, and eventually they were released. But there was a guy who was writing a book about survival, and he wanted to interview Stockwell, and he said, who survives and who doesn't survive in a situation like this? And Stockwell says, well, you have to have a sense of the reality. You can't base everything on hope. You have a sense of, this is the reality of today, and I'm going to do the best I can for the day. And the interviewer said, well, who are the people who didn't make it, who didn't survive this prisoner of war camp? He said, well, they were the ones who said, we'll be out by Christmas. And they put all their hope into getting there by Christmas. And then they weren't out by Christmas. And they got deflated. And so they put all their hope into Easter. By Easter, they're not out. But it was like a day at a time, doing what you can to be healthy. And I think a really great example in our modern times and our modern circumstances is Greta Thunberg. So when she was 11 years old, she used to like to watch Richard Attenborough nature films, and she realized how serious an issue climate change was and how it was going to affect so many millions and millions of animals and plants all over the planet. She became so depressed, she wouldn't eat much. She only ate with her own family, and she would only talk to one of her teachers. She was very, very, very withdrawn. And then somehow within a conversation with her parents, she got the idea that she would do a climate strike. So she made this sign and she went and sat in front of the parliament in Stockholm. And so that was a big punch. There's no guarantee this was going to work. No guarantee that the Parliament of Sweden would drastically change their policies, or that she certainly had no idea that millions of young people all over the world were going to join her. And then she'd been doing this for maybe 1 or 2 times, and a stranger came along and offered her a dish of vegetarian pad thai from the Thai restaurant, and she ate it. And I think that was a big punch as well. So it's these little things, we do that get us out of being stuck and feeling like nothing's worth it. And they could be as simple as calling somebody. It could be as simple as going for a walk, volunteering for an organization, cleaning up your garden, at the end of the year. But I think it's particularly relevant. I know a lot of you work with young people, or you are a young person. And in my experience, young people are far more aware of the reality of climate change than a lot of adults. This is very true in the United States. I don't know about other countries, don't know about Finland, but it's very true in the United States. And young people are very worried about this, obviously. There was a study by a nonprofit global organization called Avalanche, which I've quoted several times in several places, and then I found out that Panu was one of the people who worked on this study. And they interviewed young people from all over the world, I think 10 countries. Yes, 10 countries. And they asked them about their feelings about climate change. And half of them said that their concern about climate change affected their study, their sleep, and their eating habits. And 75% said that they looked toward the future with a sense of dread and fear. So, and what has often struck me about this reality that we're all facing is, I was born in the 1940s, the late 1940s. And when I was in school, everybody was worried about the Soviet Union was going to throw a nuclear bomb at us. And so we would have these ridiculous exercises where the bell would ring in the school and all the kids had to climb under their desk and put their hands over their heads like that, as if that was going to save us from nuclear fallout. But so it was a constant fear. The difference is, of course, is that we hoped that the Soviet Union wasn't going to bomb us. We hoped for that. Climate change is real. You can't hope it's not going to happen. And probably many, if not most of you, have seen the recent report from the UN that says we are almost certainly not going to reach that 1.5 degree temperature rise in Celsius. That would mean that we could at least somehow ameliorate this situation. So it's a drastic situation. So how do we live with it? How do we live with it? And my work is about acknowledging the reality of it and finding and making beauty. It's really pretty simple. And you can take this small, simple reality and make it quite vast. That's what I have done especially in the most recent book, which started out to be only about climate change, fierce consciousness. And then COVID happened. And so I realized that it had a lot to do with how the world was responding to a pandemic. And then my husband died. And I realized that it was very relevant for how we think about and live with our own personal crises and tragedies. So it's got 35 small, simple chapters with kind of interesting, kind of sassy titles like Punch Through the Avalanche, Get Dirty, Refuse to Disbelieve. I wanted the chapter titles to be like little mini instructions that people could follow, and they're kind of, a lot of them are kind of playful. I talk a lot about my own story. But the upshot is, as it is with the Radical Joy for Hard Times book, is that finding and making beauty is a lifesaver. If we can find and make beauty every day in the midst of anything that's going on in our lives, we can get ourselves through the most difficult of times. And I have lots of different stories about that. And Radical Joy for Hard Times, we created that organization. I created it in 2009. And we were looking for some way the next year to launch it, to kind of introduce it to the world, because we really wanted it to be global and not just belong to a particular culture or race or ethnicity. And we had talked at our very first meeting about how specific we should be about the ideas that we had for doing this finding and making beauty, specifically at places that are hurt, not just anywhere, but places that are hurt. And that had become very important to me, because I would lead, for many years, I was leading programs in beautiful wilderness areas in the United States, some in Scotland, in Germany, and people would go out into nature and they would look for healing and insight and enlightenment for themselves by spending several days alone in the wilderness. And I started thinking, well, what about the wilderness? What about the places that aren't doing so well? What are these humans are receiving so much from pine trees and rivers and rocks and dead trees and canyons? How are we going to give back to nature? This is too one-sided. So I thought about that and thought about it and thought about lots of different ways where it might happen. And I did a ceremony in New York City after September 11th, when the World Trade Centers were knocked down. I led a 5-day program in a clear-cut forest on Vancouver Island. But what I kept finding is that if I would offer these programs, and I offered many different kinds of programs, people didn't necessarily want to spend money to go, like to go to a clear cut. Or I had this one idea of like, let's go sit in the island part of a highway, you know, where one lane is going in and that way and one's going in that. Let's go spend a day sitting there and just see what beauty we can find. And nobody wanted to go and do that. So eventually I decided, well, I'll create a nonprofit because people were interested. So let's create a nonprofit and share this information and ideas and practices with people all over the world. So we did, and we thought, how specific should we get? And we decided to make it very, very easy for people to follow. So I'll tell you, there are 5 steps to the Radical Joy for Hard Times practice of finding and making beauty in wounded places. And only the 1st and the 5th are really necessary. I'm going to tell you about all of them. And then I'm going to show you a few pictures of some of the things that we have done. So the first one is you go to a wounded place. What is a wounded place? Well, it's whatever you consider a place that once was doing pretty well and now isn't doing so well anymore. And it could be that it's a pond where the fish have died. It could be a tree in your own backyard that has invasive species. It could be, and I know this, we've had a lot of conversations since I've been here in Finland about forests that have cut down. And this is a major heartbreak in this particular country. Climate change is everywhere and affecting beings everywhere. I did one in Pennsylvania for bats because the little bats had a disease called the white nose syndrome and they were dying by the millions. So we did one for the bats. But the important thing is to actually go to these places, not to just think about them. Sometimes people would write me and say, is it okay if we meditate about it? We don't have to go there. No, going there is important because it's like acknowledging that the avalanche has got you in its power and you probably won't get out. You know, we have to go and face this. And often the anticipation of going to these places is a lot worse than what actually happens when you get there. There is grief, but it isn't the kind of grief that sinks you down. So by the time you leave, you have to lie in bed for 5 days. I would say it always transforms in the process of actually being there. So you go to the place, and it doesn't. I want to also emphasize, it doesn't have to be kind of like a major journey. Like if you're walking along a trail and you see a tree that's cut down, Or if you, I know two teenagers in Ithaca, New York, where I live, 16-year-old girls, and whenever they see a dead animal, they stop. And as this one young woman said, we just thank it for its little life. And they'll put flowers on the dead animal. You know, so these are things you can do spontaneously. The second one is that you share stories of what the place means to you. So if you're there with another person or with a group, you talk about what you feel about this place, how it used to be, perhaps, how you feel now that this thing has happened to it. Even if you've never been there before, some people that you're with have never been there before, they can still share about the impressions that they're getting for being there for the first time, noticing what's healthy, what's not healthy. The third part is you go and you get to know the place as it is now. That's the way we phrase it. You get to know the place as it is now. In other words, we come to these places with a certain idea of what they're going to be like. And group takes time to go off on their own. Everybody goes off on their own for just a little while. We did one in Keru the other day, which lasted about 5 minutes. Usually it lasts longer than that. But, and you just discover things that are happening there. And it's often a surprise. Like one of the first ones that I did with some friends in Florida was we went to this enormous pit that was part of a military base. It was the Naval Air Force base in Florida. And it was this huge pit that had been there for hundreds of years. And they used it to practice throwing, shooting bombs into it. So there were all these holes in the cliffs. And, they weren't using it there anymore. So we weren't endangering our lives. But I was walking around there and thinking about how much damage this place had suffered over its lifespan. And then noticed little swallows. What would be the word for swallows in Finnish? These birds?
Pääskynen.
Yeah, they were making their nests in the holes in the cliff because that's what swallows do, and they were using the holes made from military ordnance to create homes. You know, that's the kind of surprise that can happen when you go to one of these places, or you see a green shoot emerging from a burned forest, or a bird singing in a tree. So sometimes things happen. You notice, I noticed once in the clear cut just how there were, we were sitting in this clear cut where the stumps were huge. Like I could almost lie down on one of these tree stumps. They were so old when they were cut. And there was a hole in the middle of this one, and there was a puddle in it, and there were all these little bugs swimming around in the puddle. That was their universe. That was their home. They didn't recognize it as a beautiful ancient growth tree that had been cut. The fourth one is everybody comes back and you share what you've discovered. And that's really quite, it's important because it kind of repopulates what you think of as a wounded place with new life. Because people go out there and they have experiences and they notice things, and sometimes people come back and they say, nothing happened. And I always say, I make a joke out of it. I say, nothing ever doesn't happen. Nothing ever doesn't happen. Something always happens because you have your whole life. You have the way you grew up, the things you love, the things you notice, what kind of day you're having, whether you had a fight with your partner, and the place is constantly changing as well. So everybody has an experience and a story to bring back every time. And sometimes people are hearing other people tell the story and they realize, oh, I did have a story. The fifth one is you make beauty for the place. And this is the magical one. This is the one where the title Radical Joy for Hard Times comes. The radical joy for hard times comes when you realize you can give something back to a place that has given so much to other beings, including humans. And by other beings, I don't only mean like ones with feathers and legs and ones who crawl through the earth. I mean rivers, rocks, soils, plants, mushrooms. Places give. And now we get to give back. And we might give back in one of several ways. One way might be we give back out of sorrow and sympathy. Like, I'm sorry this has happened to you. And here I want to just give you a little gift to cheer you up, like we would with a friend who was ill and maybe in hospital. Here's just a little gift to make you feel better. Or we might give a gift of gratitude. Same idea. And the way we recommend giving gifts at Radical Joy for Hard Times is to make beauty out of what the place offers. So stones or hay or sticks or human hands and arms, flowers, even trash that you later take out. And the idea behind that is that just as when you do work on yourself, you learn that that you already have within you everything you need to be whole and beautiful. And so by giving the place, by making beauty for this place out of what the place already has and reveals to you, you are reminding the place that it too has all that it needs in order to be beautiful. We have a day in June. These are some of the pictures I'm going to show you in a minute. We have a day in June. We've been doing it ever since that first one, where we wanted to find a way of launching the organization. And we called it the Global Earth Exchange because it was global, and we wanted to find a way of exchanging gifts with Earth. So the Global Earth Exchange. And it was so well liked that we started having it every year. So next year will be the 15th year of this. And the invitation is for people to go to places that they love and make beauty and do this simple practice. And what has been so interesting is that people fall in love with these places. And it's happened to me over and over and over again. It's so unlikely a response. People often don't even go. As people say, well, my friend had this crazy idea. It says, let's go to a toxic site. You know, we can't go in, but we're going to stand outside the fence and do this thing. People sort of roll their eyes and go, well, all right. And then they end up saying, I fell in love with this place. When it was finished, I didn't want to leave. The place, I thought I was giving a gift for the place, but the place is still giving to me. It's something comes alive through this new kind of exchange that's different from what we ordinarily do and say and believe when we go to a place that's damaged. Ordinarily, we think we go and we feel outrage, we feel sadness, we feel the need to fix it or protest or write an angry letter to somebody. Yeah. The need to fix it is very strong in us humans. No, something's wrong here. We got to fix it. This is just about being there and letting the place in, like absorbing it like a sponge, and letting the place absorb us. So there's this really kind of a sense of exchange. And this, so this has been going on for 14 years now, and it's happened on all 7 continents. And it's really beautiful. And if you look at our website, radicaljoy.org, you can read the stories and see the photos from all of these all over the world and see what people have done. So shall I do this, or do you want to do it? Okay, let's look at the first one. This is Bali, a place that I have spent a lot of time in, and it's in the northern part of Bali. And they are in a clove forest. You know, cloves, it's a spice. I don't know if everybody knows what that word is. Cloves. Somebody know that word?
Neilikka.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so that's a clove forest. And they've had so much rain. The rainy season used to last from like November to January. And it's so irregular now because of climate change that it rains on and off all year. And the rain is so heavy that it knocks the flowers off the trees, so they can't have cloves. So they're in their temple clothes, and they're in the clove forest, and they made that wonderful bird. as a way of participating. And that particular group, the woman in the green is a friend of mine, and they've been participating every year in their own way. And they don't do it with those 5 ways I mentioned. Sometimes they'll have their own, their own Balinese ceremony. They certainly don't sit around and share about what the place means to them, because that's not who they are in that culture. But they made a wonderful bird. Okay, next. This one I'll go through quickly. This was a group in Florida who made this circle and did programs for a few years in a row for the dolphins, which are of course affected like all sea life by warming temperatures in the oceans. Okay. And this is a group in Boulder, Colorado at Naropa University. And they used to go every year to this coal burning power plant, which is, you can see the towers in the distance. And sometimes they would go and protest, but one of the teachers there started taking them to just make beauty there. And one of the interesting things that happened at that particular one was there was a teacher there, and he came from a coal mining family in West Virginia. And he said he'd always felt conflicted about that because, you know, he loved his family and they worked hard, they had a really hard life, but he knew how bad coal was for the environment. And there was something about being there in that particular way that felt to him as if his own life and his environmental activism came together. This is a particularly touching group. It was a group called the Afghan Peace Volunteers. And, you know, it just breaks my heart to look at this because I just don't know where they are now or what's happening to them. And they had a permaculture garden, and they just would participate by working in their garden. You know, they didn't do any of the other stuff, but that was what they did. This is 2 women in Baltimore, Maryland. They've been doing the Global Earth Exchange ever since the first one. And they go to a park, just the 2 of them. They go to a city park in Baltimore and they pick up trash and they make the most wonderful birds. They just every year, they just make my favorite birds out of rubbish and leaves and stuff. And I just think they're so creative and colorful. And this is, you know, I talked about a spontaneous one. So that tall building there is what grew up from where we grew up. It was constructed. It sprouted out of the ground by magic. It was where the World Trade Towers used to be. And this friend of mine who's an artist, she was walking by one day and she had this Chinese food in one of those little boxes. And she opened it up and she realized it looked like a bird. And so she just put it in front of that building in remembrance of what had happened on September 11th, 2001. Spontaneous little action. This was a group, the woman in the t-shirt and their 2 kids and their friend, they were living in Bolivia. And there was a kind of tree. Can't remember what the tree is called. It begins with Q, but it's a tree that's endangered. And so they went there, and we used to give T-shirts for the first few years, and then we realized that wasn't environmentally such a good idea, so we quit doing that. And this is one from Antarctica, which I also like to show because these are scientists who work on Palmer Station, Antarctica. And like the Balinese people, they are not about to gather around with their friends and share stories about what the place means to them. But they are sad because their glacier moves back farther and farther and farther every year. And she said that glacier used to be pretty much right outside their window, and now it's really far away. So that's their participation. And that's what makes me happy about how this whole thing works, because it's very, very individual participation. What's the next? Oh yeah, okay. Well, this gets into I'm going to talk a little bit about this because I want to bring it back around again to youth. I've had the opportunity in the last few weeks to work in several different American universities and colleges, which has been a longing of several of us with the organization for a long time, and it just started happening. So it's very, very gratifying. And I want to just share a few of the things that I've done at these, because they've been pretty simple, but they've been really effective. So then that beautiful wall behind there was created, and it's a map of the future. The whole wall actually starts with 1000 AD, and it goes all the way, past to where you see for 3000 AD. And people were invited to come along and stick put signs on it about what they think is going to happen in the future. And there's one place in there where there's a lot of stuff. It's all sort of current. Maybe it goes for the next 50 to 100 years. And it was just very interesting to walk back and forth and see the kinds of things the students were posting. Like somebody wrote, architecture will be legal. Somebody wrote, people will understand the language of the animals. And then somebody wrote, coral reefs live, but they spelled coral, not C-O-R-A-L, like the animals in the sea, but C-H-O-R-A-L, which is like a choir. So there's a small circle there. That's me there, and wearing the same sweater. And we had 6 chairs, and there was an audience. And I went there knowing there was going to be an audience with this whole exhibition about the future. And I was pretty skeptical because we wanted to do a council. And council practice is a really beautiful and profound way of bringing the inner self out so that others can hear it and share it. And the guidelines of council are, you sit in a circle, you have some kind of a piece that you hold, that you pass around, and you speak from the heart. You don't espouse some kind of idea or a political opinion. You certainly don't give advice. You share from the heart. The second guideline is you listen from the heart. So you're not judging other people. You're not comparing yourself. You're not wondering if what I share is going to be good enough. The third one is remembering that there are others in the circle, and you don't want to take too much time, but you want to speak fully. You want to have your voice heard. And the fourth one is to be spontaneous, and of course that's the hardest one. And so we did that there, and there's a certain version of this called the spiral council. So there are 6 people there. So the first person speaks, passes it to the second person, and then when the third person receives the talking piece, the first person gets up and vacates their chair so somebody else can sit there. And I was worried that this wasn't going to work because college students are not always very forthcoming with their opinions. But I did a little bit of an introduction and shared one of my own stories about climate change, and it was really profound. I asked them 3 questions, and sometimes the questions would change. So the first question was, what have you experienced in the past few days that gave you wonder and delight? Really simple, not a challenging question. People came up with all kinds of things. And then the second question was, what's weighing heavily in your heart and how are you moving through it? And I made it less particularly about climate change because so many students are really upset about the war in Israel and in Palestine. So it kept it sort of open. Most of them did end up talking about climate change, which is the real focus of that whole exhibit. That was the second one. And then the third one was, which is also a chapter in the Fierce Consciousness book. So then they're like, after the second one, there's like some empty chairs. And I said, who wants to come up? Who wants to come up? Nobody was coming up. I said, okay, the last one's going to be fun. I promise it's going to be fun. They came up. So the last question was, what's your superpower? And I love asking young people or adults that question. What's your superpower? You know, the tendency is that we want to be humble and modest about who we are and what we can do. But I had a young friend, he's in his 20s or early 30s, and he used to ask people, what's your superpower? Like, what is it really about you that makes you able to deal with life in the remarkable and individual way that you do deal with life? And how are you, and that enables you to help others in a unique way. So I invite you all to think about this, not necessarily, you know, not now, it's not, you're not going to be tested or anything, but just to think about it and play with it. Because as I say, the tendency is to be humble and modest and shy about it, but it's really great to make it big and spectacular. So the last question was, what's your superpower? And they answered that. So those three questions together started out light and invited them to sink in. And then the last one was to kind of bring it all together and tie in, who are you and how are you going to help in the world in a quite spectacular way. So thank you. We can do the next one, which is the last one. And this was a program at a college on Long Island, New York, about an hour outside New York City, called Adelphi University. And they have a fall arts festival every year. And a member of the theater department made that stylized template of the earth. And the students were invited to make, then they had collected all kinds of stuff just from the campus, you know, like leaves and all kinds of things. Somebody brought string, and they made little gifts for the earth. And what's the reason I wanted to show this one and mention it is that the two teachers who had invited me to come kind of warned me in advance that the students are not very open. Like they don't, she said, don't worry if you give your talk and nobody wants to share anything. So I did, and I talked, and I told my own stories about this. I encouraged them to admit their own grief and their fear and their hope and their sense of camaraderie with one another and friendship, fellowship, and as they made these little pieces. And then we were sitting around in the circle afterwards, after they placed these, and they were really sharing. And the two teachers afterwards told me that they were astonished that these kids were sharing the way they did, and they attributed it to the fact that I had just been kind of ordinary about it, you know, and shared my own stories and didn't try to be the expert who had all the answers, who had it all figured out, who never worried about climate change or wanted to tune out or, you know, do any of the things on Panu's climate wheel of emotion, or Panu's range of climate emotions. So I think that's, for me, it was a really good lesson to be honest and sincere and almost like be one of the students, but with enough of a leadership role to make it possible to move the thing along. And since I just said that I shared my own stories with it, it comes to mind to tell you about a little act of beauty that I did just a few days before I came here. And that is in my little house in Ithaca, New York. I have a stove that burns wood. And I get my wood from a guy who has about 10 acres with his family. And he brought me this wood this year. And he said, unfortunately, there's a lot more of this because in the northeastern United States, there's an insect called the emerald ash borer, B-O-R-E-R, which is eating the ash trees. And they are dying. They're really, really dying. And he has 10 acres of land, and he said it's just dying. So there are all these trees, and I was burning this wood for maybe a month and feeling grateful about it but sad about it. And then I thought I have to do a ceremony for the ash trees. So I went to my little shed and I put about 10 or 12 of these logs in a circle in my yard, and then I put some bird seed. I feed the birds. I put some bird seed on them and some berries, and offered them to the birds and the squirrels, and then just went around and thanked the ash logs. You know, and I left that there for a couple of days, and then I brought them inside and burned them. And it just seemed like, you know, it's just this simple little action to do to acknowledge something that's wrong and that's not working, and to find a simple, symbolic, ceremonial way of thanking, you know, just thanking. And I started out by talking about finding and making beauty every day. And honestly, I truly do believe that it's a lifesaver. And I had the experience recently, well, 3 years ago, of my husband died of cancer. And even at that time, even in the worst times of going through that, I was constantly aware of beauty, of the way the vegetables were growing in the garden, of the way the birds were singing, of the kindness of my friends, you know, of the guy that I barely know who came by with food. It was just, I was so opened up with sorrow that it was like what was getting in was just kindness and beauty and wonder and the amazingness of life, just to keep going. The birds have to sing, the weeds have to grow, the leaves have to fall, you know, life just keeps going. So it kind of proved to me that my own theory that finding and making beauty is really essential for life, it proved to me that it was true and that it was a way that I could live by. So with that, I think I will stop and I will turn it over to you to hear about how Panu and some others are going to talk about how you work with with youth and climate change, and then after a bit we'll have time for questions and discussions. So thank you all very much.
Warm thanks, Trebbe, for all this and the examples from around the world. And that's the website on the slide, so there you can find a lot of these stories and photos. And if you practice this yourself, you can also share your own stories and photos. Next, we'll have like a 4 minutes time for sharing, just in groups of 2 or 3, and you can feel free to use your own language, which is Finnish for many of us. For those of you in Zoom, I recommend standing up and doing something with your body, and you can write something if you have a pen and pencil, or just meditate for a while. But just a short fair discussion that what does this spark in you? What kinds of thoughts and feelings? And let's practice listening and a culture of safety, and just some sharing between your partner and you, for like 4 or 5 minutes. Please, sir. And if you feel like standing up, that might be a nice thing also. So, just some remarks on bridging Trebbe's work with Finnish contributions. So, I do research on ecological emotions, ympäristötunteet, and other things related to the psychosocial dimension of environmental matters. And yes, some slides. I also get some exercise by pressing the arrow. So, this is a photo. Those of you who were at the Nuorisotutkimuspäivät a couple of weeks ago also saw. It tells of something central in the experience of young people in contemporary world, which is the great contradiction between awareness of the ecological crisis and the impression that still the world goes on business as usual. And it can be difficult to take on, and then people have different strategies with which they try to survive. Here actually is also hidden a climate emotion wheel in the middle as a sort of countercultural act in this Times Square, New York. It has the word hope also, because a company called Hope Hydration is providing ad space for NGOs. So this is what Trebbe mentioned. I just briefly say that this kind of tool is available. All these kinds of tools are simplistic, but they may be useful in discerning various emotions that people, including young people, may have in relation to ecological matters and climate change. So, ilmastotunneympyrä, this is in the process of being translated into Finnish. I don't know if it's public yet, actually. It probably will be very soon at least. And it can be found online. An organization called Climate Mental Health Network published it, and I was working with it also, and we're planning to do some more materials. But I'm tempted to go more deeply into this, but I'll try to restrict myself. The same goes for this. This is a process model of eco-anxiety and ecological grief, which is also found freely online. And there's a more easy to understand Finnish summary ympäristöahdistuksen prosessimalli at the website of the project where Hanna comes from. And so this tries to make a simple enough but also nuanced model of how it is to try to engage with the state of the world, especially in its ecological dimension. There's unknowing, semi-consciousness, awakening on shock for many people, and then there's a key to this model, which is this coping and changing with 3 dimensions of action, grief, and I'm arguing in this academic article based on interdisciplinary research that all these 3 are needed if people want to adjust and transform to meet the demands of the situation. And if you do only one of them very heavily, you end up in the danger of moving to that outer zone of stronger anxiety or depression or burnout. And for many ardent young climate activists, for example, the trouble has been that it's difficult to take enough breaks. And so if you only do action overly much, there's the danger of burnout. And for some people, if you are really heavily in the midst of grief and you don't get respite, rest from that, or you don't get feelings of efficacy by participating in one way or another to making a better world, then you can end up more towards depression or so-called complicated grief. And distancing can help to a certain extent with stress, but then you get cognitive dissonance and affective dissonance and so on. And the reason why I'm showing this, or actually 2 reasons. One is that it's always so nice to show one's work to others. And the second is that I think the methods that Trebbe described are especially important in relation to this grieving dimension. And that is something relatively new in communities. Some communities in the world have more skills about that, but especially in the industrialized countries, there is emerging social and communal forms of meeting changes in the world, which include grieving. But I think we need much more of that, and Radical Soil for Hard Times offers embodied and social methods for doing that. So there's both the peer support and working to overcome so-called disenfranchised grief, äänioikeuden suru, and then there's the embodied connection and relations with the more than human world. So there's several things happening in this methodology which Trebbe then described. And I think it would be great if adults working with youth could also give ideas for these kinds of collective methods and observe what kind of elements of them may be present in things that young people do. The Finnish scene, so to speak, around eco-emotions is that there's lots of interest among environmental educators, artists, art scholars, and youth scholars around the theme. That's, in my opinion, excellent. And if you can move to the next one, for some reason it doesn't do that, but you are doing great job. Trying to balance between the PowerPoint and Zoom, so thanks for that. There is also practical work with teachers and students. For example, this Toivoa ja toimintaa is one example, but there's many also in the Lappeenranta region, for example. More of this would be needed, of course, and empowerment of teachers and youth workers to do that. If you can press again, sorry for the animations in the slide. There is a rising interest also on somatic methods, and also in Youth Research Society, and I think that Trebbe's work offers much to this, and there were some hints of this also in the presentation, that it can also be movement-based, but there's more of that in Trebbe's book, for example, next week. I want to mention also that next week there's the International Remembrance Day for Lost Species, kadonneiden lajien muistopäivä. You can press the next one also. That's the website internationally for it. So that's one interesting way to do an annual theme day for encountering ecological loss and grief. And sometimes it may be easier if there are social practices around these kind of issues. And people have done that in various parts of the world. We did a small thing in Helsinki last year, and we'll do again this year. And for my part, you can press the next one also, please. I'm encouraging people to experiment both with Red Joy and Lost Species Day methodology in your own context. And both can have this embodied holistic dimension. And thus, very finally, I'm trying to keep this very short to give space for both the other commentators and the joint discussion. But if you want to listen more, we do have this provocatively titled podcast with environmental psychologist Thomas Doherty called Climate Change and Happiness. So what could be a meaningful life or a so-called good life amid the ecological crisis? And there's often discussions of themes closely related to this. So this was like a condensation of some themes, especially linking with ecological grief and embodied methods. I've been very grateful of the many workshops with Trebbe in Finland. I look forward to the speeches of the other commentators and the joint discussion.
Okay. Yes, very many thanks for this lovely speech and ideas that came from there, and thanks for commentary also. And my name is Panu Pihkala, and I'm bringing the greetings from the organization Tunne here, and I'm also currently working in a project that was originally founded by Tunne and Panu and one other mental health organization in Finland, and it's kind of doing some practical work in this field, and I have had the opportunity to work in this project as together in the student mental health organization. Through there, my work field is mostly connected with students and young people, and yes, I want to bring some greetings and some words from the field there. And first, because I'm substituting the more experienced Tunne ry members, which I'm very happy to be a member of also myself, and it's a possibility that you can easily join this movement. And it's a kind of interesting story to hear or to think about how this all activity started. And it was something like 5 or 6 years ago that some mental health or social sector workers were thinking, those are friends of mine who are now unfortunately ill at home, and so they started to think. Of course, this process was going on elsewhere too, but in Tunne ry's context, it happened so that they started to think that, okay, what's because we all feel this this despair and this worry about and this somehow helplessness and anxiety around climate and all issues. And what is the thing that we can do if we are not in the technical field, or we don't have the global solutions, or we don't have, but what is it that somebody who is working with people can do in this these days and in this around these problems? And so that's how it came to the idea of making this organization be born, and so through that it has been a collection of different methods and different inspirations from all over, and together with Panu's work and many others that I would also yes. So like to try to also give all people who are working with human connections or around these. So what are those things that how we can help people to share about the experiences, thoughts, emotions, and also bring this into different contexts. And at the moment, we are mostly concentrating on doing this in education or in student communities, for example, in universities and colleges. And it's very interesting to interact with people in universities and hear what they are thinking and how it still is kind of a new idea to actually go towards this whole global things through emotions. And so that's basically what we are doing in everyday work. Yes, and at this point I think I will hand over to Sophie.
Okay.
Thanks. While my colleagues are searching for the PowerPoints, so the project that Hanna described, www.ympäristöahdistus.fi website tells a lot more information. So www.ympäristöahdistus.fi, and it has an English summary also. A special thanks for Hanna for stepping up at a rather short notice after illnesses. You know that COVID-19 is sort of going in waves around Finland. Also, for following more of Trebbe's work, there was mentioned the website. There are also some Zoom sessions. Earth Hospice is one of them, which happens quite late on Finnish time, 23:30. So we have been discussing with Trebbe that it would be great to have a European time frame suitable event. So that might be a follow-up. So we'll try to email you, those of you who have registered, about those upcoming Zoom sessions. Trebbe is also doing an Earth Exchange Cafe, is that the exact name, which is Facebook Live, and then it will be also watchable as a recording. And the regular time for that is always Finnish time, Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. So there's going to be a live stream today evening. They are interviewing some strange scholar with the name of Pihkala or Pihkala, depending on who writes it in internet. And that's regrettably why we can't with Trebbe join you at the Jatkot, but we warmly encourage you to go and talk with Sophie and others.
Yes, please join. Please join Jatkot with me. It will be wonderful. And I cordially want to thank you, Trebbe, for your beautiful, wide and emotional lecture today, but also in Keuru and Tampere, where I had opportunity to listen your wise words and all what you have done in this world. It has been such a pleasure and honor to be with you in several locations and also do some small social rituals and maybe tiny deep play in public spheres also together. Thank you for all of this. What I have been building in the youth research is something that I call Planetary youth research. It has 4 dimensions. First, I hope that we would more and more learn to identify with young people today and in future. Secondly, we should encourage universal consciousness. And thirdly, humanity's relationship with nature should be encouraged in better harmony. And fourthly, I think we need stronger environmental ethics. And I put some pictures of social rituals and deep play under. Panu already mentioned the day. There is a photo how it looked last year, and on the left-hand side you see planetaryDance.org. It's made by Anna Hauprin, this planetary dance. You can look more from the website. I have organized a few of them in Finland. And in the middle you see the picture you might have seen before. It's made by 8th graders. It was their spontaneous play in a small forest-like area in Helsinki. They just had a few minutes time and they created this beautiful thing, and they give me promise to use it here. So what is deep play? So I leave you now reading this slide because I need to go under this podium because it wanted to come and say something to you. So few seconds you can read on meanwhile. Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to come to this seminar because I have beautiful Trebbe Johnson, and I know English too a little bit. I am sometimes quite good in deep play or inviting people to deep play. I love deep play. I just love it. No, I don't love it when somebody does something like that. My cousin, I have a cousin, her name is Sophia Lane. And my cousin, Sophia Lane, went there. She tried to do radical joy for hard times there. And it was so hard to her. It was so hard. She was looking at that and was so depressed about and sad. And she was like, how can I find any joy? And when that happens, when my cousin Sophia Lane is very depressed or sad, or it's very dark moment to her, or she's threatened or something like that, then, maybe then, she remembers me. In these very dark times, she made to remember me. And that happened. Sophia Lane remembered me. And she started to think, could it be possible in this kind of environment I bring, if I could come, because clowns, they know all the emotions and they can find play everywhere. They are creative and they can find beautiful things and build different things. So, my question to beautiful Trebbe Johnson is, what do you think? Could the world savior clown or beauty and joy protector clowns, or just name it how you prefer, clowns, be a kind of application of radical joy for hard times practice? What do you think?
Yes. I think we should make a video. You should teach the world how to do this in a new way.
Thank you.
Well, warm thanks to the clown and her cousin Sophia. Sophia waved Laine.
You're welcome, thank you.
I'm always very happy when the clone shows up, and it's always a special occasion. I've learned it doesn't come, or tape don't appear too often. After this rich and multicolored round of commentaries, we have some time for Q&A and joint discussion. I'm really sorry for Zoom folks. It might be tricky to get your voice heard, but please write into the chat, and Jonas, please save the chat so we'll find a way. And there's possibility, of course, always to email Trebbe or me or Sophia and so on. But please, dear audience, questions, comments, and let's be mindful. I think council practice also others at the time, but we'd love to hear some responses or questions or comments, even though it's 5:30 and some people maybe.
Joo, haluan kommentoida, että in English maybe. Why not? I just want to comment. It's so great to have something like this, what just happened with the red nose, and we are so much in general hanging around here in our head, and then something that brings totally something that comes from deep, we all have a child in us, and something that touches this child in us and joins. Almost I felt we should come and dance with you here. More red noses.
I have 2 extra words. Just in case
Sing, like dancing and also singing and these kind of things. Just came to my mind one very serious happening, which was like all day lectures and this, and then was it last or second last invited speaker was maybe some of you know Eero Peltonen is a traditional is teaching traditional Finnish songs, like you sing and the audience responses, and it's really fun, and that came in the middle of scientific lectures and all, and then it was so interesting what happened afterwards when we had some moment of something that touches us deeply in different way, not intellectually, but and combining these different ways, I think really. So thank you. Everything is important, but combined with this red nose, great. Thank you.
But I really think that, like, doing that kind of science, where scientists go and do some social rituals together with different people, I think that's that kind of science we need, where we can try to combine the heart and the mind, and also do that together with children and elderly people and everything between, and kind of encouraging people to take a different position, also academic people.
Yeah, warm thanks for the comment also, and this relates to the international study that Trebbe mentioned, and the topic also. So imagine how it feels to be a 15-year-old today, and in school usually things go business as usual, and there's topic A, geography, topic B, climate change. Yeah, it exists, so let's go to eat something. So I think we will need more and more things that really break the routine, and they need to be creative, and it would be lovely if they could be open to the whole range of human emotions. The sound always makes me think that somebody is behind your honor.
Would like to share your own experiences of anything, or comments, questions? Everything is very welcome. Tunne, please.
I just actually realized that I have a photography project with my friend, which you can see in some pictures also, and Sophia also maybe. I just realized we started this project for like 3 years ago, Now I realize this is actually a part of this theme. Like we are going to like clear cuts and everything, taking photos there, awakening emotions, you know, these kinds of things. And people who have seen the pictures, they usually find many layers. They find beauty, even if the place is devastated. And I just realized now that this is actually like related to your work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd really like to show you some of the pictures maybe later.
I'd love to see them. Yeah, please.
Yeah, and if you feel like sharing one of them at the Red Soil website, that might be also.
Yeah.
Is there any questions in the chat, by the way? So if we can't hear you, we can maybe read your thoughts and comments aloud. It's been quite a long day.
Yeah, no pressure.
No pressure.
Pressure, but if I can, Trebbe, would you like to comment on the comments or anything you have on your mind? I know it's been.
Cheers.
Yeah,
To know what the clown did to help her cousin Sophia, who was so sad about all his logs. How did the clown cheer her up, or how did the clown play there?
The clown appeared to seminar. Sofia Laine was invited to give a commentary in a seminar where we discussed the process model from the Panu Pihkala. So the clown came there and told the story from this Vallilan Laakso and showed all the emotions and showed the process wheel, how it works for the clowns at least when facing and trying to balance what you are facing, and made also in that story what the clown told there, she finally did kind of a small gesture giving back to this Vallilan Laakso, because in that valley that was there, the trees were cut because of new tram track. There was this area for sorrow. It was called Puiden surualue, this kind of area of sorrow for the cutted trees. So some artists had hanged these signs there. So also in that commentary or this seminar where the clown came to tell its story, it ended up that clown also went and brought something to this area of grieving area on that valley. I don't know how to explain this, but also, yeah, because yes, that helped a lot, and that made me, Sofia, think that actually this would be a very interesting project to go to these clear-cut areas with other clowns and look what happens when, and maybe clowns and not clowns, or people who have still their clown inside and not showing outside. So with different people, but maybe also clowns, and maybe the clowns could be some kind of people in between, I don't know, encouragers or something, that they could do even more crazy and funny or beautiful whatever stuff there, but it could be harder for more normal persons. I'm in a process, and in a dialogic process with this clown person, so I don't know where it will lead, but this is one alternative I have in mind.
Yeah, I told her that was the best comment I have ever received during presentation. So, but young people often love to do drama if the conditions are right, for example. So, and some people are doing participatory drama as part of climate education, like Anna Lehtonen, for example, in Finland, and others. But there might be more, and teachers often need very hands-on tools to do it. So there might emerge interesting things. Caroline Hickman, my dear colleague from Britain, climate therapist who was leading the international study, interviews children about climate change by using hand dolls. So it's not the researcher talking to the child about climate change, but it's two seagulls discussing climate change, for example. So this may be also related to research methodology. I know there's lots of huge researchers around, and there's another clown, and if we would have time, I would sort of try to invite some of that. But perhaps we have to close on this this image. Warm thanks to those who were in the Zoom and who we couldn't discuss with now, and special warm thanks to Trebbe and all of you who came. Sofia, how to get to the airport photo?
Taking this place in Tuuvikatu, speak easy or easy speak, so that everybody would speak easy. So I chose this place because of its name, and it has something to eat and something to drink, and it would be lovely if you could continue discussing about these topics there. And warmly thanks for everybody here and there, online, everywhere. Thank you so much, and of course, Trebbe.